have with me Mohit Garg. Mohit Garg is the Group Product Manager at Adobe. He's a 2009, 2011 IIM Ahmedabad graduate. And before that, he was IIT Bombay 2001, 2005. Welcome, Mohit.
Yeah, thank you, Mati. Um, good
Uh,
morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm not sure what time zones everybody is in, but yeah, thank you.
yeah, it's predominantly India and some from US. So it's 10:30 morning here. So Mohit, can you please tell us about how did you end up in product management? Can you please walk us through your journey?
Yeah, so I think how did I end up in product management? So when I graduated from engineering, I spent a bunch of time um, working with different types of companies, large companies, which is like large MNCs. Then very small startup, which is probably like a 15 people startup, doing everything from hardware manufacturing to software to everything, right? We were basically building a smartwatch in this is 2006, 2005, 2006, right? And now you see smartwatches and stuff like that, but we were trying to build that for a very large Indian company. Then I joined another startup, which was more of a US India, you know, company, US startup with a India engineering office. And during the course of some of that, what I realized was that a lot of the products that we made, some were successful, but many were not. And and I was an engineer at that time with essentially, either doing embedded systems or hardware or software, called depending on which organization and product I was performing different roles there. What I mean, the fundamental question which came to my, which I was trying to get grapple my head around is what makes a product successful, right? Is it, I mean, so far, at least at that time, my view was that anything which, if you build a product, with the sound technical, conceptual understanding, and you do it right, you will be able to build a product which, will do what it is supposed to do, and hence customers would potentially come and like it, and it will become a success. And I saw that firsthand that that doesn't really happen, right? Even though you've built the best product, many times it isn't really successful. And that got me questioning in terms of why, what makes a product successful, or what was the gap, at least in what we were trying to do. And more I spoke to people, the more I realized, the more I read up, was that this function between business, which is sales in many ways, and engineering, right? And that function to me was the glue point, which essentially marries what a sales guy can go and sell, or what a customer support guy can go and talk about to customers and help them get up to speed and resolve their issues, to an engineer who can um, go and build it. And that's where I kind of figured out that there's a function called product management. It was very nascent in India. In India at that time, there were no product companies. It was primarily services driven, or some of these large organizations or large MNCs which had few offices. So that's where I realized that a function called product management exists, and that's what piqued my interest. And that was probably one of the key reasons why I went into an MBA. And that's where the whole journey started. And post I'm Ahmedabad. I mean, at that time, PM roles were not there. So I joined a startup, and then uh, moved into um, product management formally.
Okay, so you're saying that you having seen from the tech side, but having a good tech isn't essentially going to translate to a product success, and that is when you want decide to do an MBA, and you try to understand the business nuances of building a product. And post that, in 2011, I think there were not many product companies, and you started up in a startup, but you always were
Correct.
into building a product.
Correct.
Okay. So how did you end up in Adobe, Mohit?
It was a it was serendipity in many ways, right? Um, the startup I was working for was doing fine, and you sometimes keep exploring, independent of whether you want to change or not. And I got this opportunity. Adobe was setting up a new, team in the India office, Noida office, to build a new product um, called Adobe Social. Social media management was a hot topic at that time. Facebook was still in the organic posts world. They were Ads were not there. Twitter did not have ads. They were lots of companies, trying to offer social media management technologies to marketing folks. And that's where Adobe also, given their large investment in digital marketing tools, wanted to build a product around that. So, um, you know, um, I found that opportunity and ended up at Adobe.
Okay, this is back in 2012.
2012. Yes, it's been a
Number,
while.
yeah. Okay, and later I see that you transitioned to another product and you moved to San Francisco.
Yes.
So what are the product that you're working on right now?
Yeah. So let me describe Adobe's business to you a bit so that you get the full context. So Adobe has three business units in many ways, three large businesses. One is what we call as Creative Cloud, which essentially consists of Photoshop, Illustrator, all the applications which Adobe is known for, um, and InDesign, things like that, which essentially help creative professionals do their jobs better. That's a very large business for us. It is the business that we are probably, like way ahead of anybody else in the market. The second business that Adobe has is what we call as Document Cloud, which is essentially all things around Adobe Acrobat, Reader, and so on, right? All the PDF functionality, Adobe Sign, which is e-signs, e-signatures, and so on. The third business is what very few people know about, because it's not a consumer business. Adobe is a consumer brand in many ways because of PDF and Photoshop. But Adobe is also a very large enterprise software company, which essentially means that we sell to Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 corporations across the world, um, large amounts of software tools. And the domain that we, look at offering these tools is digital experience. So it is a digital experience business unit which sells any tool to a CMO to help your customers, CMO and CIOs, to help engage better with your customers, to help manage the customer journey across all the different touch points or interactions that you have with your customers. That's the business unit I am part of. So it is a very, very B2B business, B2E, E for enterprise, and now also B2, small B, which is small businesses, as we are expanding in that market. So that's the business unit I am, part of. And this business unit has been, built by multiple acquisitions over the last 10 years. With a key thought process that Adobe is a leader in content creation through Photoshop and other tools. And if you follow the content lifecycle, a lot of content gets deployed in marketing and customer experience usage, right? And that's where this business unit was built by the company by acquiring a lot of leading vendors in that space. And when I mean space, it's basically, think of a CMO trying to reach out to their audience. And these means, you want to build a website, you want to, go back and, talk to them via email, show them an advertisement, optimize their experiences on your web page, measure, what they're doing on the website. So for example, Adobe Analytics is potentially, way ahead of Google Analytics in many terms. So we are leaders in all of these different channel management tools, as you call them, and that's where this whole business unit comes about. The product I am, currently working on is an outcome of multiple years of Adobe's investment in this area, as well as changing trends in the industry. So let's take a step back, right? Let's look at any traditional industry over the last 10 to 15 years has been, most traditional industries have begun to be disrupted by, new entrants, which are technology first, right? Think of Amazon for retail, or Uber for logistics and transportation, or Facebook and Google for publishing and media, and so on, right? What this has led to is each of the traditional players in the industry want to become like these software companies because they find them very efficient, they're nimble, they move fast, they build great products, and they redefine customer experience in many ways for those industries. So the traditional incumbents, they want to become like software companies. So they have been trying to transform themselves digitally. Digital transformation is a big buzzword over the last decade or so, and continuing to be very strong. The idea there being that digital processes, sorry, each and every business process is getting digitized, which means lots and lots of data is getting collected across each of those digital touch points. So every organization is now sitting on large amounts of data as their business processes get digitized, right? Think of it as a point of sale transaction, or you just enter a store and a beacon is fired, right? Or you interact with the web page and data is getting collected behind the scenes. You have an application where you order something and data is getting collected. Your reward systems is, online. Credit card bills are getting paid online. You're paying your phone bills through all these different apps. So all of these are digital touch points where every interaction happens, some data gets collected somewhere, right? So from a CIO and a CMO perspective, they are seeing an explosion of data coming in from all these different sources as part of the digital transformation, right? The next thing that happens here is the next trend which happened in parallel is the whole tools to manage large amounts of data, the whole Hadoop ecosystem, the whole Spark ecosystem, and so on, right? So these two trends are helping people create more data and manage more data in some way, right? The other trend which is happening in parallel, is the explosion of customer touch points, the channels in which you interact with your customers. So for example, 10, 15 years ago, they were primarily like email. Like Yahoo Mail used to give like a 5 MB storage, right? That was what email was before Gmail came in. And you had SMS. Today you have email, obviously you have SMS, you have WhatsApp and WeChat and Telegram, and all these different chat applications. Then you have interactive mobile applications, you have push notifications, you have web chat widgets, you have these AI assistants, Google and Alexa and so on. So the number of interaction points, or the ways in which you can interact with your consumers and customers, is growing dramatically. So from a CIO and a CMO perspective, there's a double whammy. You have more and more data about your customers getting collected, and you have more and more channels available as well, for which in which you have to talk to your customers, and ensure consistency, because the market today is not as forgiving as it was in the past, given the high expectations on that consumers have. So if I was a CIO or a CMO, I am seeing more data and I'm seeing more ways to talk to my customers, and that's a problem today. It's a huge problem, right? So the way we are trying to solve this, and our hypothesis here is to solve this problem of large amounts of data being collected, which is important for customer experience, and also large number of ways to talk to your customers. Our hypothesis is that you have to do two things to address this problem. The first is use all this data to build a central profile record for each of your prospects or customers, right? And this essentially means that bring all the data from all the different channels and all the different business processes into one place, and make this central profile, make it actionable, right? And then the second part of the problem, which is even harder, is make it available to all these different channels. And why I'm saying it is harder, because each channel has a different access mechanism, right? Think of a call center agent. When you call up a call center, they bring up something in the screen in the CRM system, which basically says, what was Mohit doing, and get me more information about Mohit. Now, that interaction, the call center agent essentially needs all the information, rich information, PII information, but the budget that you have to serve that information is about a second or 2 seconds, right? Similarly, look at if if you as a consumer is talking to a website, or is working through an app, which is a machine agent in that sense, right? A call center agent is typically a human interacting with a customer. An app or a website is essentially a machine interacting with your customer. The time budget for a machine is very small. It's like a few hundred milliseconds because the page has to load, right? Within those few hundred milliseconds, you have to make sure you pick up the information, you get the content, and provide that information and content back in the way that you want to. So it is a hard problem to solve in both ways. So our hypothesis is that if you do these two things, you will be able to address this problem statement, and that's what we are building. So my team builds Adobe's real-time customer profile, which is part of Adobe Experience Platform, which is a larger initiative to solve this problem across the CIO and the CMO and the digital transformation challenge that people are facing today.
Mohit, I have a couple of questions from the Slido. Let me ask them. Give me a moment. Okay. Okay. Yeah. In a large corporate setup like Adobe, how do you maintain a balance and influence leadership between incremental product changes versus something moonshot?
I think it depends on organization to organization. It's a very good question. I think at least in Adobe, the product that we are building on is a moonshot, right? It is a huge investment for the company. If you see, you should go through and read some of the, if you have time and interest, some of the analyst briefings or the post, results earnings calls that are on the website, and you would see the amount of investment that at least the company is making in this. So from an Adobe perspective, this product is a moonshot, but from a any other organization or any other product perspective within Adobe or any other organization, I think it will be it's all about influence. How do you influence people to believe in what you're doing? I think you have to motivate the problem, make sure people understand the problem. Each organization is different, so there is no one size fits all thing that will go. And each organization has a different culture, has a different way of decision making, has different parameters for decision making. So I think as long as we get that, and you're able to understand that, and motivate the problem in those terminologies, in those phrases, in those terms. I mean, if you go back to the VAC assignments that all of us did, right? The selection criteria or the evaluation criteria for a particular problem has to be stated in terms of what the organization understands. As long as you do that, I think, and if your problem is genuine and you have the passion, you would most likely get the funding that you need to at least try it out. That's what I would say.
So is the roadmap is it top down or bottom up in Adobe? Is the product manager defining it, or is it the leadership defining what problems to solve?
Everything is both ways, right? So there is never all the knowledge in the organization is never with one person, even if it is the CEO or even if it is the person on the line PM who's actually working day to day on a set of questions. It is both ways. I think typically you would see higher level direction being set top down, and the details get figured out by individual teams or PMs. There also other ways which happens where some team or PM comes up with a very brilliant idea, and then that goes back to how do you make sure you get alignment on your idea and get the company to invest in it, and then you do small POCs. You get a few engineers and a few time bound manner to just try it out. If it works, you scale it, and then that becomes a potential, product to iterate on. So I think I've seen both those models work.
So in enterprise software, even I've technically encountered is that it needs a lot of customization, so a lot of implementation and handholding. So how much of it is product driven and how much of it is delivery driven or sales driven?
I, I think it all depends on. So I think there are two questions there, right? One question is, how do you ensure that your roadmap doesn't get overtaken by a single customer, right?
Yep.
Sometimes it can happen because these are large customers. They'll come in with large amounts of money and say we want this, therefore, and this is the money,
Yep.
right? And they sometimes that happens, because you have to run a business. Um, uh, so I think barring those scenarios, which you have to take on a case by case basis, they don't happen every day. There'll always be a trade-off between what do you want to offer as part of the product versus what you want to leave for customizations, um, um, by a system integrator or a consulting organization, maybe in-house or external, or a partner to come and build those things on top. I think, and that's where the PM has to draw the line, right? Engineering will not know that usually. So you will have to draw the line in terms of like, this is the abstraction that the product has to offer, and that defining that abstraction is critical, especially as you build platforms and APIs. That this is the abstraction that we define, and we believe with these abstractions, these class of problems can be solved with reference implementations, and but the exact configuration and implementation would be customer dependent, and those would be driven by consulting or other system integrators who work with you closely, specifically if it's an enterprise product.
So Mohit, since it's largely an engineering driven product, it's a lot of tech involved. How much of tech do you think a product manager should know? In
Well, I
the
think I think depending on the product you're operating on, product managers should have a very strong handle on technology. I mean, if you see two key trends, at least which I see every day, is a lot and more of products are API driven, are API first and API only, right? Look at anything which is powering all the different skills and things, powering these uh, assistants like Alexa or Google. Like tons of these skills have come up. Everything is API. There
right.
is no UX. I mean, there's the UX, there's no UI. The UX is just the voice. That's your interface. There is no graphical user interface in that sense, right? So it's a API only product, right? And all the cloud services that you know of, whether it's Azure or AWS, most of these are API first, API only. Any platform that you see, I mean, every company is building platforms today because people have realized and it's a race. People have realized the scope, or the multiplier effect that platforms can have, right? So API first, API only products are critical. The other trend that we are seeing is, if you look at consumers, right, or even business users, the number of applications that they're using is fairly settled, right? In an office environment, you have some email client, which is either a Gmail or a Outlook or Zoho or something like that, right? Or you have an office document, or PowerPoint, and something of that class. Uh, and if you're personal user, or a consumer, I mean, you may be using some chat app, maybe a couple of chat apps, right? Or some Gmail kind of email interface. The number of graphical screens that you're interacting with, or graphical apps that you're interacting with, is very limited. It's not growing, right? Which means the opportunity to build products is API first and API only. Many products will end up being API only, which means PMs who have a strong technology understanding, you don't need to understand how to code, but you need to understand what are concepts and the constraints that come together with building a tech product, right? I mean, if you can understand APIs, if you can test APIs, it will be a huge advantage for you. That's one trend. The other trend which is happening is the whole piece around microservices architecture, right? Monolith applications of the past worked when systems, were not horizontally scalable. They're vertical, monoliths, both from a infrastructure perspective as well as application code perspective. But in today's world, given the scalability that microservices offer to different applications, you will see large scale applications getting built on microservices. And microservices are provide some sort of a separation of concerns from engineering perspective, but they are a very hard problem to solve from a product perspective. The end-to-end flow of a user in a microservice, where the user is performing one action on the screen or on an API, but in the backend there are three different microservices supporting that, or five different services supporting that, and is a very hard product problem to solve, right? I mean, you can you can make it very gory and say, okay, every service has its own interface, and for performing a simple task like sending an email, you have to click 3 or 5 places. But that's the usability factor at that point, right? So microservices make the product scalable, but they have a potential of making usability very complicated, right? And that's where the product has to be very strongly, used. So I think, and if you are not technical enough, microservices can be very challenging and very hard. You have to be a part architect to be able to, get through some of those
Yeah.
challenges. So I would say
Yeah.
some of these products require very strong technical bent of mind. I wouldn't say that you need to know how to code or you should have been a developer in the past, but you definitely need to be able to understand how technical systems work.
Do you guys also go for a multi-tenant model?
Yes, I think depending on the product, I mean, our product is multi-tenant, but depending on products, different products have different characteristics, and it all depends on how you want to scale, what's your cost factor, and so on.
But wouldn't data privacy be a concern in having a multi-tenant system? I mean, how can you have the same customer data on a single database for
So I
companies?
think that depends on customer to customer and regulations. Some geos and some customers, demand a physical level isolation, but I think that's usually rare customers, as long as you are making sure the data is protected and encrypted separately from everybody else, even if it is in the same overall system. They're usually okay. So and you have to go through all the security reviews and everything.
Mhm.
And at times you would see require customers come in and say, hi, it's a very large customer. They will come and say, I want all my data isolated, and that's
Mhm.
completely okay. Then you spin up a separate instance. There's a fully single instance for that customer. But again, it also becomes a cost trade-off for customers, and every single tenant instance is very expensive,
Right.
right? Whereas the multi-tenant instance will also give them a lot of cost advantages and pricing advantages. So I think it ends up being a trade-off from that perspective, unless they have very strong views and requirements.
Okay.
Hi,
Uh,
Mohit. Ravi here.
Yeah,
I have a question with respect to product market fit. So, where do you draw a line between whether I'm adding a meaningful value to the product or I'm satisfying a high-end customer, which might be not worth to most portion of the customers, or it won't fit into the vision of the product? Where do you see a line, or how do we say it won't make too much sense to add this feature? That
yeah, yeah. I think that is a good question. So it depends on how it depends on your vision, right? That's where it all lines up. Depending on how you envision your product. I mean, what is a product, right? A product is something which when it was conceptualized. I mean, the way at least I define product is when somebody says what product they're working on. I mean, my first question is, what problem does it solve and for whom, right? As long as that question is clear in your mind, and you can say what set of problems does it solve and for who all, and that's also fair if it's a large product. Um, uh, some of these things become very clear, right? When a
Yeah.
feature request comes in, and if it matches some of this, then the question that you're basically asking is, what time frame am I looking to solve that feature request? Am I ready today, or will it be 6 months or 1 year from now? And that's the only question you have to debate, right? Sometimes and that question is usually easier to answer, once you know what has to be done, and it's in the right direction, but it's just a matter of time. So that's an easy pick usually. The other area where it may usually land is, it is a complicated, it is a very different problem than what you're trying to solve. So either and if there is, if there is no customer or money backing it, you can easily reject it because it's not in line with what you're trying to do. But if there is real money backing it, then it's a question about your business priorities as well at times. Right? Do you really want that money? And if you want that money, are you willing to give away everything that you're doing today? Because it depends on how far it is from your current. It may be completely orthogonal. Then you may start building additional capabilities to support that, and there's a cost to support that, not just the cost to build that. Or it could be completely different, and that happens many times with startups, that the original product is going in a particular direction, it's going slow, but somebody comes in and say, I see potential in what you're building, but pivot it to this particular direction, and that may be a business call to take at that point. That we will build in this direction, we will completely abandon this path, or slow down this path and focus move on that path, and that point you're changing your product definition. So that's fine as well. It's an iteration.
Yeah, I got that. So we always keep what is the product vision and why we are building it. But however, there would be some external pressures where your CEO asks you to do something, but it does not make sense to add that in your product vision because it I mean it practically does not make sense.
Mhm.
But anyhow, you have to oblige to do some certain things, right? So
Correct.
job is more important than the product.
Yes and no, right? I mean, at that point, you have to tell them the trade. I mean, as long as you can articulate the trade-offs, that this is different from what we've been thinking, and this is why. Maybe they buy it, maybe they don't. They buy it and they still take the decision. Then they're basically saying that they will take care of this complexity. They are incurring some, they're investing in that, and then it's a job to figure out, what else to slow down if the resources don't go up. Or if they say that they don't buy it and they think it's part of the same vision, then it's a recalibration of the vision at that point. I mean, it's a hard conversation, but it happens every day. It's not something that
Yeah,
is
that's
unique.
Yeah.
So
Thanks,
that's
Ravi,
a
for the
job.
question. Ravi, thanks for the question. I'll have to move on to the next question.
sure.
Mohit, a lot of times we face this build versus buy. So, for example, user access management, we have tools like Okta or in the market. So, would you prefer building your own identity access management, or would you want to buy them from the market? How do you decide between build versus buy?
I think again, it goes back to what you're trying to solve and for who, right? Now, if access management is a critical part of what you're trying to solve, and building your own access management in this example will give your core problem solution a competitive advantage, or you see a different way of integrating that into your system, which is not possible in a buy or a partner kind of thing, then you would build. So it isn't an easy call. But I think if you're understanding, and it again also goes down to what complexity does it entail for your engineering team. Right? Many times PMs just think we PMs think that we just a feature, and there is we ignore the cost, and we just in fact we just factor in the cost of building it and ignore the cost of maintaining it and the technical debt which we are incurring. In some of those situations, we may take a wrong call. But so therefore, I think having strong engineering counterparts is critical in some of these decisions. You will be able to take the right call if your engineering counterpart can foresee that this may look easy right now and may not be easy for so and so reasons in a year from now,
Mhm.
unless we invest in this XYZ things, and then that XYZ things has to be factored in as part of your roadmap, right? Because if you don't do that, then you are in a big mess.
Yeah, you're
So
prepared for failure or for future.
correct. So I think I mean every line of code which is written has to be maintained,
Right.
and every line of code which is not written also has to be maintained.
Right.
because it may introduce a lack of functionality or a bug or whatever. So that has to be very.
Right. So Mohit, taking a step back, why did you choose to be in B2B space and not in B2C product management?
So I think I did B2C product management as well for a while, and which was fine. It it seemed something which was interesting. I learned a lot of stuff there. And at that time, at least, I wasn't very, it was not a deliberate decision to do B2B versus B2C. But once I started doing B2B, I've realized that the complexity profile is very different in both the systems, in both the approach, in both the domains. In B2C, it is primarily about and again, B2C is very is not just a monolith, right? There are different kinds of B2C as well. Like there's an e-commerce B2C where the product is not the website or the technology you're building, it's just an enabler. The product is what the customer is buying, right? And then there is the other B2C, which is like a WhatsApp or some sort of a chat app, where or maybe a fintech app these days, where the product itself is what you've built, right? In many ways, one could argue that. So that's depending on which flavor of B2C, there may be differences, but many times B2C is also a lot about conversion, right? Like I've known people who worked on Google search, right? Their page, and for them it's all about metrics, right? If I change the font size by X, what is the conversion rate, right? And they optimize completely on that factor, right? So many times it becomes a pure analyst, very strong analyst, and opportunity to, and then trying to just run multiple experiments, right? On the other hand, on a B2B side, the complexity is different. You have less number of users, but you have more access to those users potentially, right? You can talk to them, you can call them up, and so on. And the product life cycle, the sales cycles are very different, right? I mean, the sales cycle is obviously longer than a B2C. Usually, the number of teams involved in a B2B is much higher. You have your obviously your engineering team, your product team, you have your customer support team, you have your product marketing team, you have your brand marketing team, then you have your sales team, you have a consulting team or your pre-sales teams, um, and so on. So the customer lifecycle is very different. There's a lot of post-sales stuff. There's a lot of customization that happens on a B2B side. So I think each person can pick. Each of you can pick what you like. I think to me B2B is more natural. I like that and enjoy that.
Okay. Uh, so how did you transition from an individual product manager to a product leader?
I think it happens naturally. It again goes back to being able to build a vision and defining that vision and making sure there's alignment around that vision, and you just then helping people join that vision, and then you start moving ahead on that direction. For some people, it may just be because you joined in a particular um, position, you get people working for you, and therefore you have to then figure out how to lead them. So I think it will be both ways, but to me it is the as long as you have the vision is yours, and you have a personal attachment to what you're trying to build. I mean, it's product management is a creative pursuit. I mean, it is analytical as well. I mean, obviously you cannot do without analysis and analytical skills, but it is a very, very creative pursuit. Um, it is about building something and trying to make it perfect. With working through the constraints you have, owning it. When somebody says good things about it, you feel good. When something feels bad about it, you feel bad, right? So it is that way. So as long as you have your vision and things in place, transition to a management or a leadership role will be very natural. I don't think that will be any, because you will be talking through and having the ideas, and that transition will be natural. The thing that you have to watch out for is once you start having teams reporting into you, you should be giving them a free hand. You have to take a step back. You have to make sure they are moving in the right direction and mentor them. And that transition, at times I've seen, it takes a while for people, which is fine, which I think makes sense also, because you have to make sure the people you're leading have understood it well, are driving it in the right direction. So I think that's the balance you have to draw there.
Mohan, how do you decide the size of your team? How do you decide that, okay, now I need 15 people in my team, I need 10 people, I need 5 product managers, 5 APMs. So how do you make this call?
I think it usually depends on the one factor, one metric which a lot of people use is the dev to PM ratio, engineers to product manager ratio,
Mhm.
right? And that number is different for B2C and B2B. For B2C, and also depends on your company and your organization, other things that your PMs are involved in. For B2B, typically people say 1:10 or something like that is probably okay. 1:8 to 1:10. For B2C, I think smaller teams are there for B2C, because the speed at which you operate is probably faster in a B2C model. So maybe like a 1:6 or a 1:7, 1:8. Anything above that, there is a case to be made that the dev to PM ratio is not accurate. And the way engineering grows is usually when the product grows, and you want more investment, and you want your roadmap to move faster, your sprints to be faster, to deliver more. That's where engineering grows. Um, and therefore, with that, you have to make sure you're supporting the engineering with the right level of PM bandwidth.
Debanjali, do you want to ask this question? Debanjali, you have a question?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, I was on mute. Um, so I was very interested in understanding, for somebody who's, spent a few years in product, a mid-career product professional, how do you evaluate which product or, which company to go work for? It might be that, the company that you're working for now is suiting you fine. But if you had to make that decision and if you're looking for a switch, how do you evaluate which product you want to work for next? Is
I
it the
think
team? Is it the product? Is it which stage the company is in?
I think it will depend on what you value. I think for me, usually it will be whether I can relate to the product and the team, right? And obviously, I mean, you will filter out the company stage depending on how much risk you want to take, right? But that's independent, right? Given two companies which are of the same, the company life cycle stage, you would want to look at what product they're working on, what problem they're trying to solve, and for who. Again, go back to the same question. And do you relate to that problem, right? Can you independently conceive, or do your research to understand what the problem is? And as long as you can do that, you can relate to the problem, you understand the problem, and you can put together your ideas around what the product should do, and that matches with what the company is trying to do. I think that is probably a good way to assess that. That your thinking, your natural way of thinking about that product and the problem statement aligns with what the company is thinking. And after that, it's a people question. Do you like those people? Do you like the culture and so on? That's what I would say.
Vishwa, you have a question. Do you want to go next? Vishwa, are you on the call? Uh, okay. Okay, so yeah, okay, I have an issue with mic. So Vishwa, can you send your question again? I'm not able to find that on the slider board. Okay, let's take that up later. So Mohit, what essentially are the qualities you think will make a good product manager? Let's say you're recruiting. What are the skill sets that you look for in a product manager and a senior product manager?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is curiosity, right? I mean, the curiosity to I mean, I usually do case interviews. We give a case, and we get people to come back, and I mean, I found that the most effective way of figuring out, whether somebody has the acumen to define something, and it's typically a problem statement which is very is not out of the ordinary. It is something which you can relate to, and then you're basically supposed to build a product and define a business model around it. That's what I do as one of the key pieces, and it gives me the opportunity to figure out and debate, right? I mean, none of this is black and white, right? I mean, no product decision is absolute wrong or absolute right. I mean, different scenarios would mean you would take different calls on a similar situation. So I think to be able to understand what the person is looking at and why, I think again, it's all the decisions that you take as a product manager, the why is very important. So I think being able to articulate and understand and defend the whys is important. So I think being able to be curious about the world around you and therefore be able to define products when the opportunity arises, and being able to defend your decisions, being able to communicate those without getting um, um, unnecessarily nervous or burdened is key. The other thing which I look for is whatever you've done in the past, how well you understand that, right? I've seen people who understand really well what they've done, and they end up being people who are very sincere, and they know why and what they've done. So I think and the hard skills definitely have to be there, right? The analytical skills and the ability to present to an audience, and being able to be the ability to talk to engineers, and being able to navigate through the, the hurdles that typically engineers would throw at you. That's critical as well.
Right. So really, so to sum it up, it'll be like first principle thinking. If someone with a good problem solving ability, good communication, ability to work in teams and convince them of their vision, communication and analytical skills.
Correct.
Right.
And I think curiosity is important, because I mean, I really look at product management as a creative profession. We build things, PMs build things, out of thin air in many ways. I mean, some people say the PMs are dream merchants, right? We paint dreams and we get everybody aligned to just go and execute against those
Absolutely.
visions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So Vishwa here has a question. So Vishwa is my batchmate from 2015 2017. So how do you build domain expertise and product sense required to excel in the PM role?
I think it's a great question. Domain expertise doesn't happen in a day. It'll take time, right? And you have to stick with the domain for a few years. See a couple of products at least, and about maybe 2 dozen odd release cycles if you have a monthly release these days. So you need to be able to spend that much time, understand competition, understand your users and your customers. And I mean, in an ideal world, you would also want to see your customers, needs and their needs evolve. If you have seen that cycle, I think you would have seen the full domain reasonably well, and you can predict where it'll go next. And that's what you need to be a successful PM. So there's no magic bullet. You have to talk to people, learn more, make sure constantly talk to your customers, anticipate their needs. There is no one pill to answer that. Domain knowledge is built with time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it takes time. There's no one magic bullet. I mean, you get better in the domain with time, with experience. Mohit, how has product management changed in your time and like in 2011 to what it is now?
It's a good question. Again, right, to me, the so 2011, there were very few mobile apps. What I've seen is, like, I've seen product management go from web first to mobile first to API first. That's how I will put it. Like web, I mean, early days when we were building products in 2011 and all, I mean, there was a big trend around responsive UI, right? Something that can work on a website as well as on a phone or a tablet, right? iPad probably was new at that time. So that was the key trend, right? Then came mobile first, especially with India, in Indian companies where desktops weren't there. So mobile first, mobile only models came in, right? And now we are seeing API first, API only models come in. Again, it again goes back to how products are evolving.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's become more like an API first model product manager. Everyone wants to move towards an API first thing now. Mohit, what all tools do you use in your day-to-day life? I mean, as a product
So I think
manager.
we definitely use a lot of Jira, at least at Adobe, and a lot of wikis. I think it's the same Confluence, which I think is the same wiki which Atlassian has. Then we use for analytics, we use Adobe Analytics. Adobe Analytics supports product analytics as well, so we use our own product there. We use Adobe XD, which is Adobe's tool for building wireframes and mockups. We also use Slack a lot. Just looking at my desktop here, and Postman, a lot of Postman. I think those would be the key tools that we use.
So how has it been for you working in India as a product manager and moving to US and working closer to the customer?
So I think when I was in India, I was still working for US customers primarily, right? And the change which I feel is just the context, right? In India, the context that you get, like again, going back to the creative part of it, you need to sense what your customer is, feeling, right? And to me, an important aspect of that is what is happening in the environment outside their day-to-day job, right? Which means, I mean, very small examples, right? That news that they're reading is potentially an important factor in terms of, what is impacting their business and therefore what their need is, right? Sitting in India, it is usually hard to anticipate, especially for enterprises. I mean, if you have a small B, like a SME or those kinds of products, you have enough scale to be able to less worry about single customers usually, unless you're in an early stage. But with the B2 enterprise, each customer is big, and you have the number of customers is not like in hundreds of thousands. So you want to be able to understand what they're saying, what they're talking, and why a particular trend is occurring in their minds. And to me, that the context around is very important. The news that is being flashed, what is happening in the country, what is happening in their industry in the country, what is happening to the stock market in that country, right? All that is a critical component. Sitting in India, you don't see that. Sitting in India, you have a very good sense of what is happening in the Indian industry, right? So if you're selling in India, that's a great thing, because then you're saying, I'm seeing what ICICI Bank did today. I'm seeing what the stock market did today. I'm seeing what policy the government announced today, right? Or RBI did a rate cut, therefore banks, therefore small companies, whatever, right? Those correlations you can easily make. The business context you can derive. But if your customers are outside or far away from where you are, I think travel and visit is important. And then going and reading about the newspapers, the magazines, especially in those industries, and being able to appreciate how they're feeling and what they're seeing is very important to me. That's the big difference, in terms of how you figure out what they're worried about today.
Yeah, Mohit, do you have your development team and product managers in India for your product?
Yes, we do have a team in India. We have a team in other geos as well, not just India.
So how do you manage to work with them remote? I think it's a lot of remote working. And how do you also give them get them in pace? Let's, especially the product managers, get them in pace with you in what is happening in the industry.
So I think we talk a lot, very often. We definitely do a lot of sync ups. Both the regular sync ups that you would do typically like a weekly or something, and also you chat a lot through different tools. And especially for people who are remote, I think what thing that if you have team members who are remote, it is important that you have a communication channel open with them 24/7. Because people who are physically with you, you can talk to them a lot more, or at least even in the same time zone, that you just pick up the phone and call them. People who are remote in different time zone, it becomes hard for them to call you when the question arises in their mind. So they should have a way to just reach out to you, even though you don't respond that time. You can call them up tomorrow and all that. So over communication to me is the only answer. Documenting well and writing down well and over communicating. There's no other way out.
So, I mean, since you have been working with remote teams, has it been any different for you in this COVID period, or have you been able to easily manage it?
I think COVID has initially it was harder because we didn't know, everybody was hoping it's a short-term thing, and therefore, easy, like really itching to come back onto that, face-to-face world. But now that people are realizing that this is not going to be small, short-lived, this may be longer. There will be a lot of people are still, figuring out, how long this will go. But given that little go long, people have been fine. I think everybody has switched their minds around to say, okay, this is how it will be, and this is how we will work. So I think what we've seen is people are documenting a lot more. We are writing emails a lot more. More things are getting, wikified, versus things which were discussed on a whiteboard and just gone ahead and built. So more definition, more discussions have led to more documentation.
Right.
That's one
So
of the changes that
you're
I'm
saying
seeing.
that asynchronous communication using documentation and emails, it's helping you
Correct.
keep in sync
Correct.
with groups.
Correct.
Guys, the floor is open for questions. If anyone wants to ask any specific question, please, you can feel free to ask, unmute and ask.
Hi Mohit, Ravi again.
Hi.
So when it comes to A/B test, right? What is the typical A/B test life cycle time that you guys are looking at? And where do you take a call when you have to scrap your total development work because the A/B test is not doing well, and move on with the other products?
Yeah, I think in a B2 enterprise model, Ravi, we really don't do a lot of like A/B tests per se. That's not an the product that we build. Our products do enable A/B tests for customers, but that's a different use case usually. So we really don't do a lot of A/B tests. Whenever we have questions, we just go to our customers directly. We have customer advisory boards, or select customers who we are working with very closely on, and we value their feedback. Just go and talk to them. So once you talk to like 4, 5, 10 customers, you get a sense of how they're thinking, and
Okay.
it typically helps you just build it, iterate it over that. We do beta programs, which is in some sense is an A/B test equivalent. We pick something, build something, we go and show it to customers, maybe ask them to play with it, and they give feedback. We iterate, we kill it, we redo it. So those things we do.
Sure, got it. Thanks.
Okay, so if there are not any questions, I think we can close the discussion. Mohit, do you
I
have
I
any?
have one more question.
Yeah, please
Mohit,
go.
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Uh, Mohit, generally what happens is when we need to have compromise some scope because of budgetary constraints or bandwidth constraints, that's where I see that we have been introducing some kind of technical debt. And what is the true sense of urgency, or when do we call it as potentially we need to address the technical debt than the product growth, product enhancements,
Yeah.
where that comes in?
I think there are two ways of doing it, right? One is if you know that the MVP that you had in mind has not really materialized before you're releasing it before that. Sometimes that you have to do that. Again, it's time to market question. Sometimes it's a bandwidth question, right? So if if you know that the product was released without fulfilling your true MVP, I would say do it now. Don't push it out, right? Because I mean, if you sometimes you have to push it out as well. There are those constraints. But if you push it out, you would soon see it coming back in some nebulous form with a customer feedback. Hey, this is hard to use. Hey, this is just doesn't work, right? Oh, you have to do 10 hoops to build this and do this. It will come back in that form. So to me, I mean, if you know that there's a problem, rather do it now than later. The more you delay it, the more frustration you would see in customers, the more workarounds you would build or somebody will build to use it the way you've built it. So technical debt, you cannot postpone beyond a point. In fact, what you should typically do is earmark a bandwidth. If you see there's large technical debt, earmark a small bandwidth in your team and say, okay, we will spend 10%, 30%, whatever number, 50% of resources just to focus on technical debt, and let them prioritize that and just keep chugging along one by one on some of those areas. Otherwise, you will just build up so much, it will be impossible to do anything. You will just all your engineering will just get sucked up into support issues or bug fixing or customer escalations and so on. You will lose your entire roadmap.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, guys. I think we are short of time. We are already overshot. Mohit, any final ending things or suggestion that you want to give to the product community?
Yeah, I think my only thing would be, it is important that you love your product. You are the only person who owns the vision of your product. Everybody else that you work with are just helping you build it. They do not own the product. They do not own the definition or the vision. I mean, as long as you feel that and you own that in your minds, you would do a great job. And this is a creative profession. This is not an analytical profession.
Right. So being passionate about your product is key.
Correct. It's very important.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Mohit, for taking your time out and having this session. And thanks everyone for attending this. We will likely have more speaker sessions at least once a week. We'll have more lined up. Thanks, Mohit, for taking time out. It was wonderful having you on this session.
Yep. Thank you. Hope it was useful. Thanks.
Yeah, it was great. Great, Mohit. Thank you.
Bye.